Hello from Helsinki. Instead of introducing you to my bookshelf, I thought to show you what my grill looks like this time of the year. This small clip has been shot exactly 24 hours before our session today, and my home office, where I spend most of my days and where I'm sitting at this very moment, can be seen there. This talk is about comparing 18th century collections online, I shall call it the ECCO, and English short title Catalogue, the ESTC. This is work based on a still unpublished article currently under review. The gist of the argument is that we have discovered that there are more gaps in ECCO than has been assumed. The presentation focuses on publication types, location information, and the question of new editions and reprints in the ECCO. The paper will also show that there's a temporal drop in the data after the 1770s that coincides with the decline in pamphlet coverage. One of the main findings is that especially the US-based publications are underrepresented in the ECCO. Also, the number of duplicates in ECCO is higher than has been previously anticipated. There are also biases in ECCO coverage between the most popular authors with respect to gender, country of origin, editions, works, books and pamphlets. My name is Mikko Tolonen. This work has been conducted at the Helsinki Computational History Group and authored by myself, Eetu Mäkelä and Leo Lahti, but it needs to be underlined that many other people in the group have also contributed to the work over the past 5 years or so. It is, by the way, a public holiday in Finland today, and since it is +2 hours here in Finland, getting relatively late compared to Oxford, I felt obliged to add a hygge picture of a Negroni or Valentino on the background. I hope this is not taken as an indication that I'm drinking on the job, or if it is, and since this is recorded, I might get into trouble for that, so please don't tell anyone. ECCO is a unique source in scope, that's for sure. Any reader of the 18th century needs it. Then there's of course the digital humanities. Digital historians want to study conceptual and semantic change based on large historical data. In linguistics, ECCO has been used, at least on an ideal level, to uncover the DNA of historical English. What a while ago was referred to as unexpected ways of using the ECCO by Gale is now turning out to be a norm when researchers hope to move beyond keyword searches and start using systematic large-scale analysis. Gale also invested in something called a Scholars Lab to make such research easier, which is seen on this scene. But even today, the dominant mode of using the ECCO is with the idea that the regular, or soon to be updated interface is enough when it allows for faster and more efficient information retrieval. Most users are still looking for accurate hits while searching for particular strings of characters, of authors they are interested in, keywords they are after, or, for example, quotes from their favorite works. For this group of users, the reliability of keyword searches is, of course, a major concern. But compared to the worries about OCR quality, which is so 2010s, surprisingly little has been said of what ECCO does or does not actually contain. A simple but far-reaching point. Let me make 2 important points. 1, ECCO is built upon ESTC. Without realizing that ECCO is built upon ESTC, which allows us to use the ESTC to analyze ECCO as a data source, this comparative aspect is the key. There is no algorithm or machine learning solution that we can apply alone to ECCO that will make us understand its composition. Given the constantly changing nature of digital data collections, such as both ESTC and ECCO, any rigid demands of collections to include everything seems of course naive. It is the nature of such collections that new material accumulates. However, anyone working with ECCO should still be concerned about how well it represents what would be available through more traditional analog means. The question here is not one of total coverage, but of balance, whether by using the ECCO one will see the same balance of viewpoints, opinions and contents as one would by reading the original materials. We will get back to this graph, by the way, in a second. There will always be under and overrepresented parts in a data put together from earlier historical collections. But what is of importance is our ability to estimate these biases and levels of representation. Understanding the limitations and representativeness of ECCO through the ESTC is particularly appealing because the study of the book production in this way is possible due to the relative technological uniformity within the handpress era. Our access to ESTC metadata enables us to design and implement a transparent research ecosystem that provides flexibility in terms of data integration and analysis without being at the mercy of the interface. We got a few articles published about this. This gives us a chance for the first time to examine the correspondence between ECCO and ESTC in a greater depth and scale. In order to build a joint analysis of the ESTC metadata and ECCO full text collections, we also organized, harmonized and matched the records between these two data collections, also enriching these datasets with additional statistics that can be derived from the original records and by linking them with some other external sources. Now, let's start moving towards the actual comparison of ESTC and ECCO, but let me still recap what I've been saying so far. While this should be important also to those using keyword search interfaces mainly, the issue of dataset bias is of relevance, especially for any endeavors to make use of ECCO quantitatively. In short, if ECCO does not represent reality, any inferences drawn based upon it will be false, which is for the sake of approximation taken to be the publication record that is recorded in the ESTC, which of course is not as such the full record of all publications. Let me be clear about that. But in a time when more and more people turn to ECCO for large-scale analysis, this is a crucial concern. Let me say a little bit still about this particular graph here. As I said, the ECCO has been built on ESTC, so it works with the ESTC metadata. So we've done quite a lot of work working on cleaning up, so to say, the ESTC metadata, in particular, different actors and so forth, and also enriching the data from within. So few very important things that we've done is to use the publisher information that we get from the imprints, so that we can start building a network of publishers. And another thing is looking at the editions, which allows us to look at questions of reprints. These computationally haven't been easy tasks by any means, and the overall process that we've engaged in our research group is fairly large. Here you can see a dependency chart of how everything is linking within the harmonization process. But the beautiful part is that once we've worked with the ESTC, and because ECCO is built upon ESTC, this way this work can be immediately used when thinking about what are we doing with ECCO. I promised earlier to talk to you about this figure, so I'm now keeping that promise. I placed myself here in the middle so you can study the graph if you like. I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the overall development of ECCO. Now, for the overall statistical development of printing in early modern Britain, it has often been assumed that the development is of exponential growth. A dedicated analysis of popular works and authors can draw, however, a much richer picture concerning the simultaneous qualitative changes in the overall publishing landscape, which are actually quite nuanced. In terms of the ESTC and ECCO, this figure here, it shows the overall distribution of ESTC entries for the 18th century, as well the share of entries appearing in ECCO. Count spikes in individual years, such like these, they appear to uncertainties in dating. The uncertainty dated records, they cluster significantly around every even decade, some middle of decades years as well, such as the 1750 and 1800. Not handling these records separately may have quite an effect for any analysis trying to trace temporal phenomena in the corpus. So 54% or so of the records that are contained in ESTC are also reproduced in ECCO. But the question still remains whether these 54% are distributed equally on the so-called axis of interest, or if these are biases, or there are biases in the representation. Now, from the absolute counts depicted in this figure, it's very hard to see whether the proportional share of ESTC entries make their way into ECCO and whether it changes from year to year. Especially while the total number of printing products in the ESTC, it grows very rapidly, especially after the 1780. These products no longer make their way equally into the ECCO. So, while in absolute terms ECCO contains much more material from the end of the century, in terms of proportions it contains less. Both of these findings can cause bias for analysis. Whether they do depends on the kind of analysis then that you perform. For example, any analysis that would take ECCO to represent 18th century language as a whole would be biased towards modern vocabulary because of this. On the other hand, an analysis that seeks to compare the first half of the century with the latter half would face problems if it turns out that the balance in the types of material included for the early 18th century is different from the types of material included in the later half. In our studies, one crucial factor turned out to be the division between pamphlets and books. Now, precise definition of an 18th century pamphlet or book that would cover all the different cases is impossible. For our purposes, based on experimenting with different ways of categorizing the data, we eventually ended up with a cutoff point of maximum 32 pages for a pamphlet and a minimum of 128 pages for a book, regardless of the leaf size. We also had an in-between category of works between 33 and 127 pages. Defined this way, pamphlets make up 50% of the ESTC for the whole of 18th century, while books and in-between works each make up 25%. These numbers, they stay remarkably constant throughout time, even when total volume increases drastically after the 1780. In this graph, we see first that book-length print products have a much higher chance of making their way into ECCO than pamphlets. However, we also see that while the proportional representation of books is relatively equal throughout time, the coverage of pamphlets is both more varied, as well as drops significantly between 1765 and 1775, quickly falling from around 50% to around 30%. Remembering the rapid growth of print publication at the end of the century, we can conclude that while the number of books in ECCO rises to meet the rise in the ESTC at the end of the century, the number of pamphlets in ECCO does not rise equally. Thus, out of the pamphlets produced in the late 18th century, much fewer make their way into ECCO. Conclusion: be careful if you study 18th century pamphlets based on ECCO. Let's take a quick look at the places of publication as well. The numbers here tell you how much of ESTC is covered in ECCO. Evaluating whether there are temporal differences in the spatial coverages, the Irish coverage is consistently over 60%, reaching an average closer to 70% towards the end of 18th century. Coverage of England falls steadily towards the later part of the century, but remains still above 50%. The Scottish coverage in ECCO is below 50% for the most part of the early 18th century, but rises closer to that of England later. In terms of bias, the North American representation in the data really sticks out. The US coverage is consistently under 40%, especially in the later 18th century. That means that 60% ESTC recorded publications are missing from ECCO. A partial explanation for this is that to a great extent, the geographical spread of material is dictated by which institutions have provided the scans for ECCO. The main body of the microfilm collection used for ECCO comes from the British Library, Oxford and Cambridge, while American libraries were part of the microfilm project underlying the data. It is still clear that they remain heavily underrepresented in the dataset. I'm running out of time, so I made this rather sneaky choice of showing you a graph about top authors by category and how they are covered in ECCO, and then I'll talk to you about reprints. Now, the reason for this is that my intended graph of reprints would have taken too long to talk about, and it would have been a shame not to show you that with respect to authors, the usual suspects of literature, they are very well represented in ECCO. Now, but with respect to reprints, we've estimated that approximately 37% of the publications in ECCO are potential duplicates. We additionally analyzed that the amount of duplication varies significantly by publication type. Out of book-length publications included in ECCO, 51% are further editions of works already included, while out of pamphlets, only 21%. Given the difference in page counts between books and pamphlets, the duplication of content on the word level is then significantly higher. By our evaluation, a whopping 51% of the content of ECCO, as measured in words, can be duplicated. But let me conclude by talking to you why the reprint question matters. Our assumption is that such a huge scale of reprinting has a large impact on any text mining of ECCO. Currently, many digital humanities people have assumed that the significance of the reprint phenomena is limited and it would not affect the results of large-scale text mining. In our perspective, the matter is quite different. We should also think about the kind of analysis that we are doing with quantitative methods. If the idea is to understand what was available for the general public at a particular time, including reprints is useful. However, if we aim to study how new ideas appear over the 18th century, then attention needs to be paid also to excluding the reprints. In the same way, If our interest is to find out how language evolves, we need to be aware of this phenomena